All right, welcome back, Community Focus here on Central Kentucky TV. Glad you could join us. It's basketball season. As you remember, last week we had our resident guru of Nelson County here on basketball, 5th Region Hall of Fame basketball coach Minor Harmon in here with us talking about high school basketball. Last week we gave you a little preview, a little glimpse of what we thought about in going on in NCAA tournament time, and all the conference tournaments are over, all the regular season's over, and by the time some of you see this, after we've taped it, some of these games may be over, so we may make ourselves look a little foolish already. But Coach, appreciate you being here.
Well, we're good at making ourselves look foolish, and Kenny, I tell you, my challenge this year is not to beat you, but to beat both my grandsons, because I was talking to them the other night about the show we had last week, and mentioning something about the brackets, and they both said they beat me. So my challenge is to beat them this time, not
well,
you.
My son, it gives me the same challenge too, and he rubs it in. That's why I asked him today. So what's the bet going to be? So it depends on which one of us wins. So, that's sort of after the fact. But I think we both agree on one thing, just going backwards, that we both got Kentucky winning it all. Now, how they get there, you and I differ just a little bit, but let's go down to get some of these. As you mentioned, there's some pretty interesting matchups if they come to be.
There is, and which side do you want to start with first?
Well, let's go ahead and go on the Villanova side.
Okay, let's go on the Villanova side. Now, everybody's got an opinion about which is the strongest region and which isn't. Personally, I think the East region is kind of wide open. Looking down this list, I think a very interesting matchup that could occur either with NC State or LSU is Villanova's second game. I think Villanova will beat Lafayette, and I've got NC State beating LSU, but I think that's kind of a toss-up game there. But NC State's been a little more consistent this year than LSU. I think NC State is very capable of knocking Villanova off. That's a game there that's kind of questionable, I think. I've got Northern Iowa and U of L in that second round. I've got Louisville, of course, beating UC Irving, and Northern Iowa beating Wyoming. And then moving on down, I got Providence and Oklahoma, and Providence knocking off Boise State or whoever the Boise State Dayton winner is. And then Oklahoma beating Albany, and Michigan State and Virginia, Michigan State beating Georgia, and Virginia beating Belmont. So there's some pretty good games in that second round there. Michigan State and Virginia would be a good matchup. And also I think U of L and Northern Iowa would be a good matchup. But moving on into the Final Four of that region, I've got Villanova and U of L. And I think U of L's the type of team, Kenny, that they struggle offensively. But if they knock down some shots, I think they're in a bracket where they can win a couple of games and do some damage in the tournament. But a lot depends on their offense, and they've struggled this year. But in Oklahoma and Virginia. And then the final two in that region, I've got Villanova and Virginia. And then I think probably Virginia will come out of that and represent the East region in that particular region. But I think there's some very interesting games there, particularly the second round. If Michigan State and Virginia play one another, Michigan State's been playing better of late, almost won the Big Ten tournament. But Villanova in that matchup with NC State would be a good one.
You and I pretty much almost identical on that, because I got Virginia coming out that way too. Now, U of L I think they caught a lot of heat, obviously, during the selection committee show, and they were saying some people thought they were a little overrated. With losing Chris Jones might have made it even worse, but thought they were going in on name recognition and would struggle a little bit. But I think you and I both got them going at least the Final Four in the middle in that region, and maybe even further. I mean, they might. Patino always does have a surprise at the end of the year.
I think he does an excellent job with his team, and usually by the end of the year, whatever potential they have, Coach Patino is going to get it out of them. I just think they're a little limited offensively. And Virginia, I know a lot of people think they play boring basketball, but they're a very good defensive team, and they're getting healthy now. They've had some injuries, and I think Virginia is a team that they say defense wins championships, and certainly Virginia is very capable with their defense. Moving on down to the South region, some good matchups in there, but I think, of course, Duke, I think they'll move on to the second round with San Diego State. I got Utah, and probably if I've got an upset early, it's Eastern Washington over Georgetown. I think Georgetown's been up and down this year, and I think they're very capable of getting knocked out by a team, and if I'm going to pick an upset early, it's going to be Eastern Washington over Utah. I've got SMU and Iowa State, and I think Iowa State's a very dangerous team. I got Iowa and Gonzaga. Getting into the Final Four of that South region, I've got Duke, Utah, and Iowa State and Gonzaga. And then the final two in that region, I've got Duke, and this is real questionable. I think Iowa State's played really well this year. I was impressed with them in the Big 12 tournament because they won 3 ball games, trailing double digits, and came back and won 3 ball games. They've played extremely well this year. They've got 25 wins. They're an exciting team to watch. They rely on the 3. They press, and I think they'll beat Gonzaga, and I think they're capable. Coach K and Duke will probably get in there and win that South region. So I've got Duke coming out of the South region.
Okay, well, about the only difference of mine is I've got Gonzaga going all the way because what I've seen them play, got a very tall team. We got a team that can match up very well with Kentucky. And matter of fact, Kyle Wilcher, that would be ironic that Kyle Wilcher would be the one who would stop their winning streak this year. But he's a excellent Gonzaga team. But yeah. Never, ever, ever count out Duke. They seem to always have a way of coming back, no matter how good or bad they are throughout the rest of the year.
I think what's interesting about Wilcher is that obviously transferred and left a very talented team this year. But even the year he's having a fantastic year. He's been one of their better players and certainly showed his basketball ability. But if he was still at Kentucky, he would play, but he wouldn't be getting the playing time.
He'd probably be 11 or 12 playing on the team.
So I think that's interesting how well he's played. When you look at the West region, and I think there's 2 really strong teams in this one, and we'll talk about Wisconsin and Arizona a little more, but going on that first round, I got Wisconsin and Oregon, Arkansas and North Carolina. And I think Arkansas has been up and down so much, I think Wofford might upset them. They've got a good solid ball club, but I did give the SEC Arkansas an opportunity to move and advance. Of course, Ole Miss came from 17 down.
Yeah, I told you I went to bed during halftime of that game, so I had to get up early the next morning, and they were getting beat so badly. I was shocked when I got up the next morning and saw Ole Miss had won.
Well, that speaks well for the SEC. And of course, Ole Miss and Baylor, and then you got Ohio State and Arizona. And I think Wisconsin and Arizona both are just excellent basketball teams, and I think they'll figure out a way to meet in the finals of this. I've got Wisconsin and North Carolina in the Final Four of the West, and Baylor and Arizona, and then I've got Arizona and Wisconsin. And I went back and forth here, and I wanted to pick Arizona, and then I wanted to pick Wisconsin. I went with Wisconsin because they've got quite a bit of experience back. They've got some good shooters, and been there and done that, and they were there last year and they got to the Final Four, and I think they'll be highly motivated to get back there again. And I've got Wisconsin coming out of that West bracket.
Yeah, well, again, you and I are pretty much almost identical on that bracket, and I think I mentioned to you before we went on is Wisconsin is a team that scares me. Out of this whole 64 or whatever teams, Wisconsin, watching them throughout the year, to me, is the team that can match up more closely to Kentucky, I think, anybody on the bracket. So they're the team that scares me more than anybody.
And they got a big win here in the Big Ten final here over the weekend. I think they were down like 11 points with 5 or 6 minutes to go. It certainly demonstrated what kind of team they were. They didn't give up. They fought back, got into overtime, and then just ran away with it in overtime against Michigan State. So a win like that going into this NCAA tournament will be a shot in the arm, a confidence boost to them, and I think they're kind of like Kentucky. I think they're on a mission, and I think they're going to be a tough team to beat out. And of course, the Midwest and
that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's the Cats. Kentucky all the way. But looking down that list, I've got Kentucky playing Cincinnati. Cincinnati will struggle some this year. Purdue, the winner of that will play Kentucky, but I think Cincinnati is a little quicker than Purdue, and I think Cincinnati will be there. You got West Virginia and Maryland, Texas and Notre Dame. And Texas is going to be a disappointment this year. I think they were preseason ranked 6th in the country. They've lost several games, And there's several teams on here, Kenny, that's got 20 wins, but they've got anywhere from 7, 8, 10, or 11 losses. And when you've got that many losses during a season, it shows you're capable of winning with the 20-plus wins. But when you got 7, 8, or 10 losses, it shows that you're an inconsistent team.
And that Notre Dame team is just the opposite. It's one of the teams they didn't expect to be really well, but they've been coming on stronger every single game.
I agree with you 100% there. In fact, they played really well in the ACC tournament, beat Duke and North Carolina, and they shoot the ball so well. They're one of the better shooting teams I've seen this year, and I think they're a team to be reckoned with. And then you got Wichita and Kansas, and this ought to be a dandy.
That's a game you and I, and that's going to be a grudge match.
Yeah.
And they don't play each other.
No.
And they're about like U of L and UK used to be.
And what's interesting about this, Kentucky and U of L fans always talk about it. Somehow they ends up having Kentucky and U of L in the same bracket in the NCAA tournament. Well, Wichita and Kansas, they don't play. Kansas doesn't want to play.
They're only about 50 miles apart.
And Kansas doesn't want to play them. And here they are. If they win, they're headed to playing in that second round. And Kansas has got some injuries. They've got one young man I think is going to be ineligible, and he's one of the stronger players inside. So I think Wichita's got an excellent chance of beating them. I think Notre Dame will beat Texas. I think Maryland will beat West Virginia. And then, of course, Kentucky moving on after beating Cincinnati. And then I've got Notre Dame and Kentucky in the finals of that Midwest region. And I like the Cats, and I think they'll be there along with Wisconsin, Virginia, and Duke. The four I've got. And it'll make a very interesting Final Four. And I've got Kentucky and Duke in the finals. And
I'll put yours up here for a while. And like I said, ours is very similar because, like I said, if you go right down to it, about the only difference I've got, I got Arizona, Wisconsin, and Notre Dame, Kentucky, and Gonzaga and Duke and Virginia. Well, I did have Louisville going all the way. I had LSU coming out a little further than what you did. But other than that, it's pretty much identical.
And I was real close to bringing Gonzaga out, too, because I've watched them several times this year. They're a really good offensive team. Struggle a little bit defensively, but on the other hand, I think Duke does a good job offensively, but I think they give up quite a few points. And if you watched the ACC game with Duke and Notre Dame, Duke had a very hard time guarding Notre Dame and did not do a good job guarding the perimeter, and Notre Dame beat them off the dribble several times. So I think Duke's a little suspect on defense. And Gonzaga, if they can shoot the ball, and it seems like every year everybody talks about Gonzaga, and they come out of that West every year, and then when they get to the tournament, either first or second round, somebody slips up on them. But they've got a very experienced team this year, and I like Gonzaga as far as getting a long way in the tournament. But they're going to have to rely on that shooting, and sometimes when shooting leaves you, you've got to have your defense there. And Gonzaga, I think, is another team's a little suspect defensively.
Well, I know you had a couple upsets. I couldn't find a lot of big upsets. Man, some 8 and 9s here and there, but I was really struggling to find a 12 beating a 4 or 5 this time because it's just the parity. I mean, there's no team that's really that much greater than any other team, but some teams have just earned a better spot, and they're there for a reason.
Well, I think if you really get down to it, I think there's probably 6 or 7 teams that, in my mind, have been consistent enough all year long that they could string together 6 wins. Denny Crum always said to win the national championship, there'll be a game somewhere in there, particularly the early rounds, that you may be off night shooting and you find yourself trailing, and somehow, some way, you escape with a win. And if you escape with a win, it kind of rights the ship, and then you go on and win the tournament. And it takes a team that's consistent, and that's why I mentioned a while ago, when you've got several losses, it's hard to show that you've been a consistent team this year. Last year was a kind of an unusual year in the fact that UConn and Kentucky both had several losses, and the top rated teams really didn't make it to the Final Four. So, but this year I think that the Kentuckys, the Wisconsin, Duke, Virginia, Arizona, teams like that have been consistent enough that I think there's about 5 or 6 got a chance to win it if everything's equal and they're all playing well. I think 4 or 5 of those teams, one of those 5 will be the winner.
Well, again, I know you got Kentucky, Duke in the final. I got Kentucky, Virginia in the final, which is pretty close. But both the SEC and the ACC, 2 very good conferences in this area. And Kentucky, one thing they got going for them, in addition to the talented team, is they got some pretty good. I mean, they're going to be in Louisville the first 2 games, the Yum Center. You go past that, I believe it's Cleveland. I believe they're going to. Then back to Indianapolis. And I mean, there's not too far for Kentucky fans to go. If it's not flooded, the parking lot's not flooded.
Well, that's a concern for me because Marsh and I are going down Thursday and Saturday, and and we've already heard about the parking problems down there. So we got to figure out what time we're going to go and how early we'll
Yeah, I
get
was
there.
down there earlier today, and it's just now starting to recede. So maybe by Thursday night it might be down.
And of course, the Cat fans, they were out in droves in Nashville. If you go by people and talking about how many thousands and thousands of Kentucky fans were in Nashville, didn't even go to the ball game. Were in Nashville to just be a part of it and party. With Cleveland, about 4 or 5 hours away, and Indianapolis just right up the road there, 2 or 3 hours. The Kentucky fan base, as long as the Cats keep winning, I think the Big Blue Nation will be out in droves, and they'll have a huge following everywhere they go, and a lot of excitement now for Kentucky fan base. But you know, having coached and watched a lot of these games over the years, only one bad shooting night, an injury, a team that's shooting hot against you. Just a little bit off in terms of how you approach the game mentally. There's teams on here capable of beating Kentucky, and I know listening to the ESPN talking heads, what was interesting, they keep asking this question: does people want to see Kentucky go undefeated and have a history in the making, or do they want to see somebody knock off the big dog?
Right.
And they were talking today on ESPN, and there's kind of mixed answers. Some people felt like Kentucky needs to win it all, and so we can see history. And then other people said, no, people want to see the big dog knocked off. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest in this tournament as long as Kentucky's still winning, because people, if you go by the TV ratings, they've had some good ratings this year because of the Kentucky win streak.
Well, I think, like I said, I think if Kentucky's being Kentucky, I don't see anybody challenge them. I got a couple teams, Virginia, Wisconsin, Duke, obviously, and Gonzaga, that could challenge them. Outside of that, I really don't see them being challenged that much, because I think they're going to be on their game and they'll be ready to go. But again, as you said, anytime. To me, the biggest challenge is ladies and men need to lock up their daughters, because Dick Vitale's on the loose, so you never know where he's going to pop up at. But other than that, you know, I think the biggest mystery is, can somebody challenge Kentucky? Can they play Kentucky's game for a full 40 minutes?
Well, it's very interesting. As I said, they always say that somewhere in that run of the 6 games you have to win, somebody's going to put you in a situation where you're down maybe at halftime or down with 4 or 5 minutes to go, and how are you going to perform? The people that have questioned Kentucky this year, and I've said this all year, either Kentucky is just really, really good and the SEC is down, or Kentucky is really good and the SEC is up, because there's been 4 or 5 times in SEC competition this year Kentucky's been in a situation where they've had to struggle to win. They've had a couple overtimes early. I think they were down to 9 to Georgia with about 8 minutes to go, and down 6 to LSU about 5 minutes to go, and they found a way to win. And there's no cliche in coaching: good teams found a way to win. Kentucky's a good team; they have found a way to win. And I think they can see light at the end of the tunnel, Kenny. And if they stay focused and on their A game, I like the Cats.
I think you're right. And like I said, I'm going to be cheering for the local teams. I really am. I'm going to be cheering for Kentucky, and I'm going to be cheering for Louisville. Love to see a Kentucky-Louisville final. It's going to be difficult because the Cards, like I said, they've got a few problems this year that they are definitely going to have to overcome in this 6-game run. But I've got them going as far as I can get them. And I know they've beaten Virginia already once this year. So that's one, I've got them getting beat by Virginia, but they've already beaten Virginia once, and they've beaten North Carolina, I believe. So they've got the capability. Of course, losing one of their top players didn't help any, but they seem to be able to bounce back on occasion. And
another thing that some of the people were talking about on TV the last 2 or 3 days, there's always kind of a Cinderella kind of team that shows up. They talk about some of the lower-rated teams, and I don't know if there's a Cinderella in the bunch. And when I say North Carolina, that's certainly not a Cinderella-type team, but talent-wise, North Carolina has enough talent, I think, to play with anybody in the country. And if they could string together 4 or 5 games, they would have a shot at it. But they just haven't been that consistent this year, and they've had problems closing games out. And even in the ACC tournament, they were in position to win that and let Notre Dame slip in there and beat them. So, but North Carolina might be a little bit of a sleeper in my mind, because they're very talented, but they just haven't been able to finish games very well this year.
But you didn't bring your grandkids in, so we don't know exactly what they've got in mind and what predictions they've got. But everybody's got a bracket out there, and we hope y'all had a good time. And as we saw last year, I think somebody had $1 million challenge. usually nobody gets past the first round. I think there's dozens and dozens of losses in the first round or two. So I've never made it far enough to. I think the best I've ever done maybe 10 or 12 losses, and that's really good when you can. That's all the losses you have. So this is very inexact science, but that's, I know you spend a lot of time paying attention to college basketball. So well, E-Town got beat. We thought E-Town was going to win the girls' state tournament last week, and they got beat. So it shows you how much we know.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because E-Town was a prohibited favorite to win that, and a school out of Northern Kentucky, Covington Holy Cross, played an exceptional tournament, and I think the last 3 games Holy Cross won on the girls' side, they were all like 2 and 3 point wins, and that was a big surprise, and that's 2 years in a row now. E-Town's gone down there with a highly ranked team, and year before they finished second, and this year the people were more or less talking about how talented they were and probably would be the state champion. They only got to the second round and got beat. Anything can happen in basketball. As I said, I believe Kentucky will win it all, but one bad shooting night, an injury, fouls at the wrong time, the mental focus, they lose it. Well, there's several teams on here that could win it, but that applies to every team.
All right, well, go Cards, go Cats. We appreciate you tuning in, and Coach, appreciate you being here, and it's been a great year. So and I've enjoyed every second of it, and I think we got a few more weeks to enjoy, I hope.
Well, I hope so too, and go Cats.
All right, well, stick around. A lot more community focus here on Channel 6 TV. We'll be right back. Take care.